We are flying casual. So casual that we don't even have James and Brock here, stuck with the non-canon guy. But you know what they say about people who aren't canon? They're legends. Welcome to Flying Casual. I'm Andrew Fantasia, and I'm joined by executive producer Heidi Fetter. How's it going, Heidi?
Good to be here. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm doing okay. I'm just excited to fly casual today. We got Skywalker's Academy in the chat as well. Hello, Skywalker's Academy. We're talking.
One second. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no problem. Today's going to be an interesting episode in terms of just the content of what we're going to be chatting about, namely because.
Sorry.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Everything okay? You having some audio? Everything all right?
I actually I had my cell phone on to look at the chat, and I forgot to turn the volume down, so there was.
Oh, there was some echo. It's all good. It's
sorry.
All good. No problem.
Okay. Sorry.
Everything's okay. All right. So today we are going to be talking about something that's a little, I guess it's a little left of center for me anyway, because I'm not one to really complain about Star Wars. I don't like doing it. Most of the time, I just have fun with Star Wars, and if and when it stops being fun for whatever reason, I just don't talk about it. But a lot of trouble has been brewing, Heidi, and I mean the witches in the Acolyte really, to kind of pull from witchy vernacular, bubble, toil and trouble. They have been brewing some trouble in the Star Wars universe, and now we're kind of looking down the barrel of an uncertain future for Star Wars, because we have a show that, people were digging and curious to move forward with, and now it is no longer moving forward. And we, in the coming months, will be treated to a whole different show. But now we sort of can't help but think, why bother getting invested if Disney Plus is going to treat the shows like so much disposable garbage? So now, and that's not a knock against, I'm not calling the Acolyte garbage. I'm just saying Disney is treating its shows like fodder.
Right.
So now we end up in this very precarious situation as Star Wars fans. And we're going to try to spend some time today and maybe talk about what Star Wars could do to rectify things. But before we do, Heidi, what's your sort of general temperature right now as a Star Wars fan? How are you feeling?
I mean, I liked the show. It had its moments that weren't perfect, but what is perfect? When it was great, it was amazing, and there were times where there was a dip, and I might have moved some episodes around, but I'm very disappointed it was canceled. But there's a lot of projects that seem to be canceled. Sometimes I feel like Disney's like or Lucasfilm's like that deadbeat dad who makes a bunch of promises and doesn't follow through. And maybe some fans were angered because they didn't like the show, but now the fans who like the show are going to be angry. So I don't know. I feel like they're just putting quantity before substance, but I think they can be lazy sometimes because they're taking like old material. Disney is taking old material and changing it with diverse actors. To me, that's lazy. Keep the old material sacred and just do like African folklore. I know I'm going off script here, but I'm just saying, it's this whole thing of just, it's more like just, they care more about making money than making people happy like they used to or whatever. And I'm just saying, they're princesses and stuff. Just have like an African story about a Disney princess instead of just rehashing old material. And I think they're doing the same thing with Star Wars. They're being lazy sometimes.
Yeah, Disney loves getting back on an old horse if they think they can turn a profit off of it. My general temperature right now is kind of similar. I really was digging Acolyte. I don't think it's perfect either. It had its peaks and valleys. One of those valleys was definitely the pop song, but there was a lot to love in that show, and particularly because and I know everybody's always saying move away from the Skywalker saga and do your own thing, and I totally love that concept. I would, you know, uh, any fresh news story that has nothing to do with what's come before is a-okay with me. I'm all for that. However, it became more and more apparent, especially in the final episode of The Acolyte, that this was, even though at first it appeared to be just something completely separate, this was actually trying to build the eventual story, even if it's loosely connected, of how we ended up getting Anakin Skywalker's virgin birth, right? It was really sort of walking into that world. And, I wasn't expecting the final episode of The Acolyte to end with, Palpatine sneaking up behind Shmi Skywalker and going, blah, 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 you're pregnant now. But I was sort of expecting the show to not so much answer those questions per se, but to kind of say, here is what caused that to happen. This show was the Boston Tea Party, and Anakin's birth was the American Revolution, right? We didn't need to see them happen together, but we know one ended up like leading steps into the other. So I thought once they canceled it, that a very important little jigsaw puzzle in the overall Star Wars tapestry is now no longer there. It's going to be a blank piece in the puzzle, because this was leading to that in what looked like a really fun way. In the same way that The Mandalorian and all that stuff is kind of pointing in a Snoke direction, this was pointing in a Plagueis-y, Palpatine-y direction. As a Palpatine fan, that really made me happy, and then double disappointed to hear that that was no longer going to be a thing. And they did a lot of great world building in The Acolyte. They laid a lot of cool foundation, and to see that just kind of fall by the wayside now, I don't know, doesn't sit too well with me. And it's one of many slights that I feel the world of streaming has just continued to throw in the fans' directions. So, Heidi, before we move on to our points of what might the next steps be for Disney, for Star Wars, for Lucasfilm in general, are you interested in seeing the Acolyte story? Because I think this is an important question that a lot of fans are probably asking right now. Are you interested in seeing the Acolyte story told in a different medium?
I really don't want to read a comic book or a book. I think James was talking about how he thought that was lazy. Someone like me, I have ADHD, which is funny because I write books. I can't read books. I'm not gonna sit and read a book. And we have this character, Chimera. I mean, he's an extremely interesting villain, and I want to see his story continue. Even if it's just like a movie on Disney Plus. I know they said they would never put just a movie right to Disney Plus, but I want at least wrapped up. Or give this character another vehicle. Also, maybe there's a way you can save this. ABC, Fox, they're all owned by Disney. Put it on terrestrial TV for free. Maybe it'll get a second wind, like Family Guy, which was canceled twice. Put on Adult Swim, it becomes a hit. It's now been on TV for 20 years. So maybe there's a way to reintroduce it to the audience. Another thought, maybe these series, drop it once a week on terrestrial TV, but on Disney Plus, maybe drop it all at once. I don't know. I'm not executive. I'm just trying to think of ways, get it out to the public, but still make it a good reason to want to spend money on Disney Plus. So that might be, you won't have to sit through commercials, and you get to see all at once instead of once a week. So those are just some thoughts that I think are going on, unless Disney did this on purpose to anger the fan base to do a big ride and enforce them to do it.
You never know. You never know with them. But you're right. They own quite a few big networks.
Yeah.
So it's not outside the realm of possibility for them to say,
Yeah.
hey, networks, here's the Acolyte. Here's these 8 episodes of television, which I haven't done this yet, but I've been doing this thing where I've been going back and rewatching all like the Marvel shows and all the Star Wars shows,
Yeah.
and tallying up exactly how long they all are if you don't include like the 10 hours of credits that those shows always have. So I haven't done that with Acolyte yet, but I'm curious because those were some short episodes.
Yeah.
I have a feeling most of the shows ended up being just around the 3-hour mark. So I'm curious if the Acolyte is any different or if it's even a little bit shorter, but they could squeeze some blocks of time out of that and make some commercial money to boot.
Right.
So I wouldn't mind if they did that. And yes, Skywalker's Academy, I would love a good conspiracy as well. And Skywalker's Academy mentioned a few comments back that, where is it? Here it is. They're not taking it off the streaming service, and there are 5 books coming. Yeah, thankfully, they're not taking it off the streaming service, at least yet. Thankfully, they're not pulling a Willow on us. That's still, in my opinion, one of the biggest sins I think Disney's committed in a long time. But this 5 books thing is interesting. So I haven't heard about the 5 books, but that's why this comment is why I brought that question up to you, Heidi, about seeing it continue in a different medium. Historically speaking, I am a guy who loves books. Like there is a tower of books next to me. I write to, hey, shameless plug, right? I am a book fiend, and I'm also a Star Wars fiend. But I don't know what it is, Heidi. I have yet to truly love a Star Wars book, a Star Wars novel. I've really liked a couple, but for the most part, they fall so flat for me. And I think it really just comes down to Star Wars is such a beautiful visual medium. It's a feast for the eyes and the ears. I mean, it's the only franchise I can think of where fans cared enough to learn who the sound designer was and how he made all the sounds back in the day on the originals, right? Like we all wanted to know about Ben Burtt and what Ben Burtt's job was. So to take all of that and to just stuff it into paper and ink, does it ever dilute it? It's like drinking like watered down coffee where you put way too much water and not enough coffee beans. And those Star Wars books, even though some of them are fabulously written, like Claudia Gray is a treasure. She's such a great writer. But they all have a low ceiling for my tolerance for them. And I have never had a Star Wars book that I loved enough to sort of hold up and say, yes, Star Wars can do great books. So the thought of continuing Acolyte or continuing any Star Wars story in book form, it's really a huge downgrade, in my opinion, a huge downgrade. It's like the idea of not being able to get a name brand piece of clothing, so you just tie some rags to your to your chest. Like it's really it's a low bar for me. And if they end up doing that, if they end up, like Skywalker's Academy is saying, putting the Acolyte story or finishing the Acolyte story in book form, I don't love that. I don't. And it's going to take away, for one just small thing in the whole tapestry that is the Acolyte, is it takes away the thrill and the joy that it was going to be to experience Darth Plagueis in a visual live action form, right? Because I don't even think we've seen the guy in a comic book. I could be wrong. I haven't read the old comics from like the Legends time, but that was a big deal when that crazy mofo showed up in that cave and we were all like, oh, look, there he is. So that pop, that excitement that the fans got for seeing that is immediately destroyed and undercut if they're to say, well, that's all you get and the rest is going to be in a book. It's like, okay, then what was the point? So let's see here. We have a comment from Ron. Ron is saying, I do believe this cancellation was truly due simply to inadequate viewership. Star Wars is a visual medium, so in writing comics, graphics novels are the only way to go. And I agree, Ron. I have enjoyed the Star Wars comics way more than I've enjoyed the Star Wars novels. Heidi, have you read any of the comics or no?
Again, I can't read comic books because there's too much going on the page. My brain just cannot stick to the words. I did thumb through the Star Wars comic because I was curious to see the original script for Star Wars, which is, I highly recommend you check that out because it's very interesting. But, as my sister said, she shouldn't have to read a book to understand a movie or a TV series. I just think we are getting completely shafted if we don't see the story continued. I mean, there's already been a book about Plagueis. We don't need another book about Plagueis.
Exactly.
I want to see something. The show Firefly got canceled. They at least wrapped it up with a movie for fans. And like I said, maybe you're going to not continue with the Acolyte, but there might be one or two characters I would like to see again. A thing is, Disney Star Wars, when they bought it from Lucasfilm, there was a lot of angry fans who did not like it. So Disney and Lucasfilm has to take that into account. When they put something out, it's going to have to be a lot better than what some of their other things are going to be, because there is automatically going to be fan backlash against it. It's going to be tenfold. So you've got to make sure when you spend the money and you put it out, that it's got to be the most amazing thing ever. You can't just be cash cow and say, let's do this, 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 let's throw Easter eggs at it. I mean, I understand. The truth is you can't get away from the Star Wars saga. Even if you tell stories about like Andor, technically the Star Wars saga is still there because it's around it. But as I said, make it few and far between. If you want to have a cash cow, do cartoons, because you can do things with cartoons you can't do with live TV. You may have to do that for a while, but if you put something live out, you've got to make sure that it is the best quality you can do, because there is automatically going to be negative backlash against it.
That's a great point, Heidi. I never even thought of that, how the cartoons, they seem kind of immune to the backlash, don't they? I mean, we've had four. I always forget about Resistance, but we've had 4 cartoons that just did their thing. They were solid. They powered through it. And they had their peaks and valleys too. Like, I don't think The Bad Batch was perfect, but I didn't hear a single soul jumping on Twitter or Reddit talking about how Bad Batch ruined their childhood or anything like that. So that's a great point, how that one medium seems immune, but when the live action shows up, everybody's a much harsher critic. And you're right, they do need to step up their game if they're going to make it a live action show. Skywalker's Academy is saying, okay, there's a book called Acolyte, Wayseeker. I love how the Star Wars books have so many colons in their titles because they just keep on going. Star Wars, The Acolyte, The Wayseeker. Star Wars, The High Republic, Phase 3, Adventures, Comic, The Wayseeker. It's Colon City. Releases June 5th, 2025. Okay. So I got to look that book up in a bit to see what that's all about. But the novels don't cut it for me, and the idea of continuing the story in the novels doesn't cut it for me. So I've put together just 5 quick bullet points here that we're gonna just kind of go over. These are 5 quick ways that, in my non-professional opinion, because I've spent a lot of time writing, but that doesn't make me a professional on how to run a business, especially one as big as one that would handle Star Wars. But in my non-professional opinion, just as a Star Wars fan, just as a guy who loves it, 5 ways to make Star Wars matter again and bring it back on a track where we can avoid things like this. and they're in no particular order, but I think the first one is kind of the first thing chronologically that Lucasfilm and Disney would have to do, and that is ignore social media.
Yeah.
Ignore everything, both positive and negative, really, because there's toxicity on both sides. It's not cool to, be a jerk to somebody because they didn't like The Last Jedi. And it's not cool to be a jerk to somebody because they liked The Acolyte. It's just not cool to be a jerk, period. And unfortunately, Star Wars social media is just a petri dish for the worst parts of fandom. And I'm afraid that the powers that be who are making all of these calls at Lucasfilm are trying so hard to juggle every plate of every bad tweet they see. Be like, oh, this person didn't like this. Oh, okay, we'll try this. And that feels so reactionary. And that's just not how you tell stories, man. It's not. People like to hate on the prequels because nobody told George Lucas no, and they just let him do his thing. But you know what? In hindsight, the prequels are some of the most solid, consistent, fun Star Wars storytelling out there. And that was just George ignoring everything the fans said and doing his thing for 6 years. And we got 3 kick-ass movies out of it. And the backlashes that have been happening have really set a standard now where it feels like I don't know how the right way to put this is, because fans' voices should be heard to an extent, but it feels like people's ways of going about making their voices heard are counterproductive both for fandom and for the Star Wars brand itself, at least from my point of view. And that's not an anti-Kathleen Kennedy thing. That's not an anti-Leslie Headland thing. I like both those ladies. They're cool. It's just, I think they need to stop listening to those Reddits and Twitters, because that's just a wretched hive of scum and villainy, and there's no business being there when you're trying to be an artist. What do you think, Heidi?
I mean, here's the truth. I heard only 10% of Twitter actually represents a population. So if you're listening to Twitter, you're only getting 10% of the opinions out there. Yeah, I think a lot of the problem is Disney gets cold feet and they pull back, and they've done it with this. I keep hearing the Lando movie's canceled. No, it's not canceled. Yes, it is canceled. I think Obi-Wan was originally going to be a movie, but then they got cold feet because of Solo, and they turned it into a TV series. I mean, Solo might have worked better as a miniseries. I don't know. I'm not very good. Sometimes I'm not good at putting my words the way I want to. I'm just, like I said, they're just churning quantity out instead of quality sometimes. And I'm not saying they're not putting out good stuff. They put out a lot of stuff I like. I like the sequel trilogy. I like the series. It's just sometimes it's like they go full force and they make all these promises, and then when things don't go 100% their way, or if something's down, instead of saying, okay, how do we fix this, they just take it away from you, and then you're left feeling empty. And I don't understand some of these toxic fans, because I don't know. I mean, do they understand that if Disney says we're done with Star Wars, it's not, we're losing money constantly? There's not going to be more Star Wars. I don't know who they think is going to make it.
Yeah. Oh man, if I was Donald Glover, I would have such a bad case of whiplash right now.
Yeah.
It's like, get ready to go to work. Okay, never mind. All right, you're not canceling anymore. Oh, great. Actually, now it's a show. Oh, all right. Actually, no, now it's not a show. God bless Donald Glover for hanging in there. I'm surprised he hasn't made a statement yet to be like, I'm done. Like, find somebody else to play Lando. Yeah, the broken promises is a big thing, but it's actually not one of my bullet points, because I think that's sort of that's kind of a point that we've beaten. It's a dead horse that's been beaten. It's a dead father that's been beaten, really. But yeah, stop listening to Twitter and Reddit would be my first big point. My next one, and this can go wrong. This can be done in an incorrect way, but I hope they're careful about it, is merchandising. Merchandising needs to be brought back to the gold standard that it was once upon a time. And I couldn't even really tell you what I mean when I say once upon a time. I wasn't there for the original trilogy. I was not yet born, but I know that they had some kick-ass merch back then. And during the prequel era, when I was growing up, they had some amazing merchandise too. And even when the sequels were beginning, they really seemed to care about merchandising, about getting the fans excited for the upcoming movies. They had that whole banner brand, right? Journey to Star Wars, The Force Awakens. That was a thing. And then there were a bunch of books and comics with that on it. And that has just slowly trickled away into nothing. And I get it. We live in a dystopian hell. Everybody's poor. Nobody can afford merchandise. I totally understand. So that's what I mean when I say this can go horribly wrong if they're not careful. But, and I don't know if you agree with this, Heidi, but I always found just merchandise went hand in hand with Star Wars, because when you would get a brand new Star Wars movie, it was always a sun that was orbited by a beautiful visual dictionary and at least like one or two novels and a whole bunch of action figures and just all these different things that got people excited. If you were an adult fan, you were already lining up at the theater. If you were a kid fan, you would see commercials for like pod racer toys and you're like, oh, I want that. It was just a way of making Star Wars just a part of the zeitgeist, like everywhere, no matter what corner you looked in. And now that doesn't really happen. I mean, Skywalker's Academy is talking about these books that we're getting, Acolyte-based books. Okay, great, but that doesn't help sell the Acolyte because they're coming out a year after the damn thing's canceled. And I mean, the Black Series is putting out action figures every now and then. I assume in Canada, I'm still waiting for the Rebels Black Series, but the Black Series alone, I don't think that's going to cut it. And they didn't even do everybody. I don't think they did Kamir, who was like the most beloved character on the show. So Heidi, how can they make this right merchandise-wise? Do they need to call Yogurt from Spaceballs to show them how it's done?
Maybe. I mean, I was at Target the other day and I was walking through see what all the Star Wars action figures are, because I'm just curious. And the only thing I saw was Yord's lightsaber. Like, well, what kid wants Yord's lightsaber?
Was his
Yord
yellow?
got his head twisted off. Yeah, but it said Yord's lightsaber. I mean, his face was on the box. It said Yord's lightsaber. I'm like, well, who wants that? So it's like somebody didn't tell them, the manufacturer, oh, wait, this character gets his head twisted off in the middle of the thing. That was the only Acolyte merchandising I could find. So maybe you do have to get people excited about it. I don't know if Andor had many. I don't know. Did Andor have any merchandising? I mean, that was.
I don't think they did. I think you're right. Like, aside from a couple of Black Series, again, I don't think Andor bothered.
I mean, that was an amazing show, but it was definitely more of an adult show. I'm hoping with the Skeleton Crew, since I think that's more kids orientated, they might actually do more merchandising.
That's a great point. It is more kid oriented, so maybe they'll step up their game. But I mean, Star Wars has always been so utterly toyetic that even when you have something like Andor that is it's the most adult Star Wars we've ever gotten, I can't see why they wouldn't have tried something, even if it was just that stupid cereal that Cyril Karn's always eating, something. I always look back to this memory I have of back when The Dark Knight Rises was coming out, Heidi, back in 2012. Yeah. So that Dark Knight trilogy was, much like Andor, it's arguably the most adult DC/Marvel stuff that has kind of ever been brought into the mainstream public, right? Like those were the first time that superhero movies came out and you didn't get like a tie-in The Dark Knight video game on Game Boy Advance because everybody's like, this is not a movie that a kid with a Game Boy Advance is going to watch, right? But when Dark Knight Rises was coming out, I remember I was in what we have in Canada is called a Shoppers Drug Mart, which is kind of like your Walgreens.
Okay.
And there was a little section with books. And there was this tiny book that's like super. I'm trying to see if I can find a thing. Like I have this notepad here, and the book was more thin. It was thinner than this notepad. It was like a baby's first book. It even said on the front, "I'm learning to read." Baby's first, like level 1 reader, whatever, like for little kids. And that book was a Dark Knight Rises Batman versus Bane picture book, which I thought was hilarious. So yes, it's true. Some things are not as toyetic as others, but if there can be a Dark Knight Rises baby's first picture book about a scene where a guy gets his spine cracked in half by a big like, and nothing's off the table. And so I'm shocked that Andor didn't have more. I'm shocked there wasn't, a remote control BD, whatever that red robot's name was, B2 Emo. I'm surprised there wasn't a remote control of him. Obi-Wan Kenobi, again, a couple Black Series, nothing else. The Book of Boba Fett, couple Black Series, nothing else. And like that's even including like visual dictionaries, things of which that's my favorite Star Wars merchandise. I eat those up.
Yeah.
Nothing. So.
Well, I was at PetSmart the other day and they had Grogu snacks for dogs.
Oh, wicked. Yeah. Thank God for Grogu. Seriously, like there was about a year ago, I was flipping channels on TV, which I normally never do, and I went on what here locally in Southern Ontario, the station's called YTV, and it's basically the like a kids to tweens age show, right? Like that's where we would watch like Rugrats back in the day and things like that.
Nickelodeon.
Yeah, it's basically our equivalent of that. And a commercial came on for this toy called Galactic Snackin' Grogu. And the commercial looked and sounded and felt so much like the toy commercials that I grew up with that I was like, oh, finally, we're back. We're back in the merchandising world. So that would be my second point.
Yeah.
My third point is let us know that you're building to something.
Right.
If you are, give us a signpost or a landmark on the horizon to look for and to get excited for. If Acolyte had some kind of plan, if Leslie Headland was like, I have 3 seasons in mind and it's going to end with a nice little bow that's going to shed a lot of light on the Anakin Skywalker birth and all that, tell us that beforehand, but you don't have to spoil that stuff. Like you can keep that a secret, but tell us beforehand, guys, I'm coming out with this show. It's going to be 3 seasons. And by the end of it, there's going to be a lot of cool, big revelations that tie into the Star Wars saga. That's all you have to say. And we will piece together the rest by the time we're done watching a few episodes. Because look how many people by episode 3 were like, oh, this is leading to Plagueis. Like everybody felt that, right? Same with the Mandalorian and Ahsoka and that whole thing. Like it's funneling towards something with Thrawn or something with Snoke or possibly both. But if Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni or whoever could just say, here's our game plan, get excited for this game plan, everybody's going to get excited for the game plan. Like I know Star Wars is not Marvel, and what I'm saying sounds incredibly Marvel-esque, but that has worked wonders for Marvel. The second you say Avengers 4 is going to be this, and here are the 4 movies leading up to it, everybody's like the Weasel from the Foghorn Leghorn cartoons. They're like, yeah, give me, right? So if Star Wars is a different animal than Marvel, but you can still promote it the same way, and it's not going to cost you anything to do that. You just let us know this is the roadmap, and Ahsoka ended that way because it has to build to this, and get us in the right mindset so we're not sitting here thinking, what's the point? What's the point? Because that's where half of the complaints on Twitter are going, right? Like, we don't care. We don't care about any of this. Make us care by telling us what it means without spoiling the story. What do you think of that, Heidi?
I mean, if you notice, like D23, I think it was the end of 2020, and that's where they came out with the Acolyte, Rangers of the Republic, Bad Batch, blah 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 blah. The only thing we didn't get was Book of Boba Fett, because they were leaving that as a surprise at the end of The Mandalorian. You'll notice this year there wasn't a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing: it's like they either promise too much, or they get cold feet. One of my complaints is they had like a bunch of mysteries in the Acolyte, and every time they were going to reveal it, they do this old trick. Oh, I have something to tell you. We're under attack. So now I can't tell you. I hate that. That's as bad as somebody's like, I have a secret to tell you, and then they get shot and they drop dead.
Yeah.
I mean, you set up this mystery, and then you move on to another mystery. Okay, well, now I'm into this mystery, but then we move on to another mystery. I don't know. It's one of the things I heard, and apparently, supposedly, the actor who played Chimera was so amazing that Leslie Headland had to go back and completely redo the series because she realized she had a gold mine with him. So I don't know if that affected the show in any way. I don't know. I know some people were bored with the witches. I know some people like the witches. I don't know. It just seems to me like maybe some things should have. I just think like episode 3 should have been followed by episode 7 instead of saving it till the end.
Yeah, that double flashback.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they broke the pacing of an already poorly paced story. Right. You're right. Those flashbacks, and I liked them because they shared a lot of information. But if they had treated the flashbacks in a different way, maybe intercut them in the middle of episodes like Lost used to do. I don't know, something so that it would move along more smoothly. Ron is saying they can't. Their most popular shows lead to sequels, and Disney will avoid all mention of the sequel era. Yeah, I mean, you got a point there, Ron. Ask somebody ask somebody at the top of Lucasfilm now. What's next for Poe Dameron, and they'll say, who's Poe Dameron? They really like to avoid the sequel trilogy. But I like I like them too. I like them too. I don't again, peaks and valleys, but I want them to matter in the grand scheme of things. And when Disney ignores them and hides them and pretends, nothing to see here, folks, they're just doing a disservice to their own brand and their own name. And you brought up a good point about mysteries, because you can tell us your roadmap without sacrificing the integrity of any of your mysteries. I mean, we were utterly content knowing what Marvel Phase 2 and 3 looked like, but we had no idea what the stepping stones were going to be like to get us there. We knew Guardians of the Galaxy was going to be a thing, but we didn't know it was going to help set up Infinity War the way it helped set up Infinity War, right? The mysteries are still there in the story, in the text for us to discover, and to simply spell out for us that Ahsoka is going to lead into season 2 of Ahsoka, and that's going to lead into a movie called The Empire Reborn or whatever the hell, is not going to spoil a damn thing. It's just going to get us excited for Star Wars. And I'm pretty sure I think that's what Disney would like us to be. They've been behaving otherwise lately, so hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, myself and everyone I knew who went into Rogue One, they knew exactly how it was gonna end. It was gonna end right before they got the plans to Leia, but it was the journey of getting there. Again, I go back to Andor. I think I heard that Andor is pretty much the series finale is gonna end with Andor right before he meets the guy he meets at the beginning of Rogue One. We know this is gonna happen, but we still want to see it. Uh, Empire Strikes Back, that was when it took forever to get in a movie theater. You might have had to wait 3 weeks to get to a movie theater. So I already knew, spoiler alert, Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father, but I still wanted to see it. I still was amazed, and I still had a good time. So just because we know maybe something that's going on doesn't mean we just still don't want to see it. For crying out loud, the song where Chimere gets killed is literally called "The Death of Chimere." So if you saw the album before you knew it was going to happen.
I did not know that. That's funny.
Yeah, it's called "The Death of Qui-Gon. I'm sorry, Death of Qui-Gon. I'm sorry.
Oh, Qui-Gon, yeah.
The Death of Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Death of Qui-Gon. No, Chimere doesn't. Hopefully he doesn't. I'm sorry, I meant to say Qui-Gon. See, my brain's all screwed.
That's right. Yeah, Qui-Gon's Noble Land. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the prequels, exactly. That was 3 movies that basically told us beforehand our roadmap is we are leading up to A New Hope. We are telling the events that led up to A New Hope. And none of us went into those movies, I think, or rather, none of us came out of those movies being surprised by the plot. We were surprised by the moments. We were surprised by, oh my God, Duel of the Fates was really cool. And that song was awesome. We were surprised by, wow, pod racing. I didn't know that was a thing. We were surprised by the separatists and that whole structure and what the clones were like and everything. We're surprised by those little things. But knowing that the roadmap led to episode 4 didn't make us say, well, I'm not going to watch it because I already know that it just ends with the New Hope and the Death Star. Like, nobody felt that way. So I think that setting up some kind of roadmap can really help get people excited. And then finally, I have my 4th and 5th point, which the 2 of them go hand in hand. So I'm just going to kind of throw them at you at once, and let's see if we can make them. Point number 4, and maybe this is coming from a place of personal bias, but I don't care. Make movies again. Little kids, plug your ears for a second, but seriously, F Disney Plus, F streaming. At this point, like, it has been nothing but poison for their 2 biggest franchises, for Marvel and Disney. It has been nothing but poison for them in terms of the fan base's reactions and the integrity of their brand. They have just been a dump for content instead of a place to tell great stories. And if you just go back to making movies, especially because that's what Star Wars was for the longest time, you are automatically getting a leg up over another streaming show because you have Star Wars in its purest natural form. Star Wars as it was meant to be consumed and enjoyed on a giant screen with bombastic music and a freaking title crawl that tells you stuff beforehand and swipes, which I love that Acolyte had swipes, by the way, and it had great music too. But the 5th point that I need to tack onto this, because they really go hand in hand, and it's it is the biggest thing about the sequels that really stopped them from being as great as they could be, which is, you are Star Wars. You can plan a trilogy and plan a trilogy. You don't have to wait and see how the first one does and then maybe get some backing. Star Wars has always been exempt from that. You just make a trilogy. Hell, make 5 movies. be like, The Mandalorian Grogu is the first of 5 movies telling a giant story that's 5 movies long. Star Wars is the only franchise that has the power to do that has the power to say, I'm not just making 1 movie, I'm making 3. And this whole story is going to follow a through line of 3 movies and conclude in the 3rd one. No other franchise has been able to do that for, financial Hollywood business reasons. The Star Wars name carries that power. And it's like they didn't know they had that power. And they're like, well, let's just make Force Awakens. And yeah, we'll probably do a second bone. But before we write it, let's see how Force Awakens go. And that ended up being to their detriment. And then a 3rd time with Rise of Skywalker, it ended up being to their detriment because they're like, well, gosh, I guess we got to make a 3rd one. I don't know, put Palpatine back in there. If they just have the confidence in their own name and have the confidence to be a story and not content again, we can go back to a golden age of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, maybe The Acolyte would have worked better as a movie.
We know Obi-Wan definitely would have.
Yeah, I mean, I like Obi-Wan. There's not a Star Wars I don't like. There's stuff that I'm going to like better than others, but I don't know. Maybe it's too late to do this, but maybe you could take it and retool it and put it in theaters, but I don't know if people are going to pay for it now. Part of the problem is we live in a what's it? When we stream, we live in a episode, like a binge watch. I'm sorry, we live in a binge watch world for streaming services, but Disney is still writing Star Wars as if it's an episodic each episode. If you're going to do that, you've got to make sure that each episode can hold its own, because
yes,
season 3 of The Mandalorian, I liked it. I watched the first time. I thought it was good. I watched it with my sister the second time, and we just sit and binge watch it all night. And it was so much better. And she's like, I don't see why everybody's hating this. This show's amazing. I think the same thing. If you sit and watch The Acolyte and binge watch it, it's a lot better because it starts to make more sense to you. But it's like they're still writing as if it's a binge show, but they're making it episodic. I know this is crazy. Like, the shows that get released like at 3 a.m., I kind of like getting up early and watch it before going to work. I know it sounds crazy, but it's just kind of my quiet time. So I can get like people want to do that. But like I said, you're treating a binge show as if it's a weekly episodic. So if you're going to commit to that, then you have to make sure that each episode is going to stand on its own.
1000% Heidi. Yes. There is television writing and there is miniseries writing. And then there's whatever the hell Disney Plus is, and it's trying to straddle a weird line. And I found the exact same thing when I've been going back and rewatching all these Star Wars and Marvel shows lately, because I've been trying to like deduce their exact run times. That's the thing I've been trying to do. Every single one, with the exception of like some that were done well, like WandaVision and Andor, because those were paced properly, but everything else was 100 times better just as a binge, just watched at your own pace, as many as you want to sit through. And that, for them to release them weekly, shows, I think, a lack of knowledge in how to pace a story properly, because we've all seen just the way that gets in the way. Like The Acolyte, oh boy, here comes this Sith, force push, credits. That's not a complete episode.
Right.
And you only need to look at regular syndicated television for how to tell a complete episode and still have it end on a kick-ass cliffhanger that gets people pumped. Go back and look at Lost. Go back and look at Heroes. Go back and look at 24 or Breaking Bad. Like, so many great shows could give you a big episode that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and leave you drooling for the next episode right away, but you would still have to wait a week for it, and you would feel satisfied that you had to wait a week for it. No Disney Plus Star Wars show, with the exception of Andor, has done that. And even Andor had to like release those chunks at the beginning, remember? Because those first 3 episodes was like, these do not stand alone. They gotta, if they had dropped those one at a time, like,
no, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, people would have been like, ah, the hell with
But
this show.
you know what they did with Andor? Not the 3rd episode, but they dropped the 1st and 2nd episode on ABC.
That's right. That's right. I remember them doing that.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe they should do that with the Alkali. But I mean, what was I trying to say? I had a thought and I lost it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I yacked away and I made you lose your thought.
No, I lose thoughts easily. Oh God, I'm sorry. I just totally.
It's all good. Okay, while you try to find it, I want to bring up something that Ron said in the chat because where is it? Nope, it's not that one. I lied. It's this one right here. And Ron, I'm glad you brought this up, my friend, because this is something that I want to, this is an asterisk I want to put on this because, yeah, I just talked about how much it would be better if they just made movies. But I agree 100% with what you're saying. They're too afraid. They don't feel they have a movie quality story.
Right.
And that is one thing that I'm looking at you, Favreau and Filoni, right now. I know you guys are watching. We've got this Mandalorian and Grogu movie coming, apparently, right? Yeah. My concern is if you're going to continue Din Djarin and Grogu's story in this way, there better be a damn good reason that this is being told as a movie instead of just as season 4 of a show. And I know that sounds like it's contradicting what I just said about stop making shows and start making movies. But what I mean by that is you have now set different levels of standards. When I say you, I mean Disney and Lucasfilm.
Right.
You now have all these movies and then all these shows, and tastes differ, but I think it's safe to say that if everybody was to take all those movies and shows and put them all together in one big ranking list, most of the movies, if not all of them, would be above most, if not all of the shows, maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions. The shows are of poorer quality than the movies, I'm trying to say that nicely.
Right.
So if you have a movie, it better not just feel like a humdrum 2-hour episode of The Mandalorian. It better feel like an event, because Star Wars movies are events. They are special. Even the worst Star Wars movie that you can think of in your own taste was an event. It was a special film. It was bigger than life. It took over the world for that month that it was in theaters, and it was inescapable. You can't just take a Disney Plus quality thing and stretch it out and put it on a big screen and think you'll get the same effect, think you'll get the same everlasting connection with fans. Because I guarantee you, if they do that, if all they do is take a Disney Plus quality thing and put that on the screen, in 30 years, there are going to be no people who said, man, when I was a kid, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie changed my life and made me fall in love with movies. Because that quality of movie will not be able to have that effect on a human being.
I do remember what I was going to say, which was I disagreed about Disney not doing good episodes right, because I will say that at least the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian, that was amazing. That each episode I felt standalone there, so it's not like they don't know how to do it. Yeah, I don't want a. I mean, I can't tell the volume in shows too much, like a lot of people. But I don't want to see a movie that takes place in a volume.
Right.
That honestly, that's one of my problems with the prequels. It was all shot on green screen. I did not care for it just looks fake. And if you have yeah, I'm here for a good time, so But I mean, if you just have just acting in front of green screen on a movie screen, people are gonna notice that. I don't care how good it is. I mean, there's no way people aren't gonna see that. So you gotta have the budget. You gotta have the willingness to spend the budget. And I don't like. I agree with that one comment. They have cold feet, and then they get scared. It's like they go full force with one thing, and then they pull back, and they get scared again. And I mean, to be honest with you, I like the prequels, but I would be totally willing to just not do the Rey movie until they get their thing, until they get back on their feet and concentrate on this movie that's going to tie the Mandoverse together. The movie about Thrawn, the Grogu movie. I think that's what they need to concentrate on. Get that going, get fans excited, then go back to the Rey movie. Because if you release that Rey movie and it's a bomb, it's just gonna make things worse.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. You want to, I mean, striking while the iron is hot is always the smart thing to do. And the Grogu Mando iron is significantly hotter right now than the Rey iron, or even the very nebulous James Mangold prehistoric Jedi iron, which we haven't heard boo about in like 4 years now. But that is a unfortunate side effect of the business. Is you want to do what's popular, and like Ron says here, he thinks it's just to get Grogu up on a movie screen. And yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Grogu is the face of Star Wars right now, really.
Right.
The most popular character right now. And why wouldn't they want to put him on a movie? But
right.
I'm hoping and praying that they are not just doing that as a cash-in, because Disney Plus has now reverse engineered things. So instead of starting with the movies and letting those movies spin off different things like Star Wars used to, now it's the bottom clawing its way up into the movies, and that could set a dangerous precedent. And if it's done poorly, a really dangerous precedent. But all we can do is just kind of hope that they, get their ducks in a row, and that what we end up with is not only a great movie, but just a great story, a memorable story with memorable moments that we as fans can look back on for years to come and be like, oh man, that was great. And, just add that to the pantheon of Star Wars greatness. And Ron says the Rey movie being great is just as problematic as if it were terrible. I don't know. I think if the Rey movie is great, I'd be okay with that. I definitely don't want it to be terrible. And I do want to see some love thrown to the sequels. I mean, I think Finn and Rey and Poe were such an awesome trio. I think I liked them more as a trio of friends than even Luke, Han, and Leia. And that's saying a lot. Like they just seem like such a cool trio of friends. And the thought of never getting to see them again. I mean, if we never see them again, fine. Like the story ended, but to throw some love their way wouldn't hurt either.
I mean, like I said, I it's not that I don't want to see a Rey movie. I do. But I think what you're gonna have to do is build up to that. One of the problems I had with the prequels is we went right from Return of the Jedi to The Force Awakens. There's this whole story I know nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of people feel like they want this filled in. And okay, but you have to read a book, you have to read a comic. Again, now everybody who likes Star Wars is going to want to know what happened through a book or comic. I want to see the adventure that Luke Skywalker went on with Lando Calrissian. I think that sounds like an interesting story. I want to see that. I want to know more about Leia and Han's story. And maybe you'll have to recast them. I don't know. Star Trek did it. Because you could say, well, these are all stories we're hearing. They're not really experiencing them. So if somebody is telling you a story, or if you're reading a book, you might envision characters differently. And you could say the same thing about Star Wars. It looks different this time around, but maybe because we're envisioning the characters looking different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I want the Mandalore movie concentrate on, then we go to Rey, because if you go right to Rey, it's just still there's too much space and not enough information.
Right. Yeah. The Amanda movie is definitely the right move right now. It's what needs to happen now, and hopefully that movie will kind of point us in the direction of whatever roadmap is happening here. But I think that is as good a place as any to put a button on things for today, as we fly casual off into the sunset here. And I just hope that that whatever the future holds for Star Wars, it's better than what the present holds for Star Wars. Heidi, do you have any final thoughts on what we've jawed off on about today?
I mean, I like what you said. Did you ignore Twitter? I always say there are 3 things I don't talk about with people unless I think they agree with me: religion, politics, and Star Wars, because those are always hot button issues. Yeah, like I said, just I feel like they need to care more about the story than trying to please everyone. That's why Andor was amazing. He really didn't know that much about Star Wars. He even said, and I quote, "Oh, Natalie Portman might be good for Star Wars," not knowing that Natalie Portman was already in Star Wars. But he didn't care what anyone thought. He just did a phenomenal show. And maybe that's what you need.
Exactly. Don't listen to the haters, right? That was point number 1. Whether they're haters of the franchise or haters of the people who hated the franchise, just don't listen to the negativity. And just tell your stories. Just make your art and just put it out into the world. So I'm hoping.
I was just to say, as I said earlier, if they want this to work, if they want to continue, if they want to be profitable, they're gonna have to say we have to be 10% better or 20% better than most normal franchises are, because they know there are people who automatically hate it just because it's owned by Disney.
Yes, yeah, that's true too. I think the best way for me to sum it up and to close this is a friend of mine, Robin, made a really funny but very poignant comment shortly after The Rise of Skywalker came out, and we were talking about what could be next. And Robin said that from this point on, he said, if anybody wants to make a Star Wars movie, whether it's a director or a writer or a Disney executive, he said that person should be required by law to go to like a Tibetan monastery for 5 months and just live there and meditate on why they're making this movie and what the true purpose of it is, and then come back. So who knows, if he had his way, maybe he would get some a new golden age of Star Wars. But that's all the time we have here on Flying Casual. Heidi, do you have anything you want to plug? Anything, any projects, any books?
Well, you can find my books Amazon, either and writing my under my on Amazon under my my author's name. I'm blocking words today. It's terrible. Yeah, fake name. Pen name, yeah, that's it. And writing. Or I have one book under my own name. And also you can pick up James's book either on Inkshares or Amazon. And if you ever have a need a doorstop or a paperweight, or you've got that wobbly table, you can always pick up this one. So
yeah, the doorstop with the mostest.
The brick.
It is quite a brick. It is. I did not think it was going to be that thick when I started writing it. And then I also have here We Were Wizards, my fantasy novels, which are on Amazon right now, and they're full of fun fantasy adventure, just like Star Wars is. Star Wars was one of the many inspirations that got me to sit down and start writing these back in the day. They even have Dark Lords in them, Heidi. Wow. I miss when Star Wars used to have Dark Lords. Right, more things in general need Dark Lords, not just Star Wars. Like, why can't there be a Dark Lord in like Gossip Girl? Like,
There probably is. They just probably call them something different.
Okay. I'll allow it, I guess.
I don't know. I don't watch it. I don't watch
okay.
TV in years.
Yeah, me neither. Really, everything's on streaming now, and streaming doesn't know what to do with it. Oh, yeah. Well, that is Flying Casual. Thank you, everybody who joined us in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you haven't done so already, like and subscribe, and check us out also on Patreon, patreon.com/Rebel Scum Podcast, where we got all kinds of crazy fun stuff there as well. Patreon exclusives. Heidi is a member, and she can attest to all the amazing things that I do better than Brock and James.
And
sometimes.
Once again, we're into legends. At least legends in your headcanon.
Headcanon is the best canon. Anyway, that'll do it for now. Until next time, everybody, may the force of others be with you.
Hey scumbags, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.